one and shrink him down to practically nothing. And we did it in stages. And I had to work with split screens and rear projection and whatever techniques that were at that time available to me. Important thing about this film, The Incredible Shrinking Man, and it's true about every film, because I do it on every film I work on, is preparation. That is to fully prepare what you're going to shoot. And I do this by drawing a storyboard. For instance, the scene about the drops, for instance, here is the legs of the water heater. And each scene is numbered to correspond with the scene in the script. And there's this, underneath each picture is a description of the scene and what happens in the scene. And in the same way with the cat. This is what I wanted to see on the finished product. I recommend you think visually, because you're working in a visual medium. It's got to be seen, so you have to see it. It's got to be in your head. It's important because you don't waste the time on the set. That's the way I work. It saves a lot of time if you know where you want the camera right away and what the scene should look like and how many cuts there are in the scene. And that's where you make the picture. That's where you can make your mistake and take an eraser and erase it out and say, that's not right, let me try something else, you see. Now, there are many times, even with that, I would change it in the shooting because I got an idea to do it a little differently. But basically, that was kind of a blueprint for me to follow. I think I should explain a little bit about how, technically, I shot this film, Incredible Shrinking Man. I put bigger size clothes on him. I put a 17 shirt on him when he wore a 15 shirt. And a suit that was not a 40, but a 48, you know. So the clothes hung on him a little bit. And loosened the ring so that when he let his hand drop, it would fall off. So we got him smaller that way. And then we built a duplicate set in relation to him so that he would appear about 3.5 feet tall. So everything was in that ratio. And then with split screen, splitting the screen down at the most propitious place, we would have him talking to his wife.
What?
I said I've canceled our phone. They're going to try to get us an unlisted line sometime next week.
And he had a notebook, and when he threw it at her, he had a notebook that was this big.
Yeah, that's what I'll do. A whole chapter devoted to telephones and one more joke for the world to laugh at.
And when he threw and she caught, there was a notebook this big.
Scott, people know, they realize they're not laughing at you.
So all that stuff with him when he was small was done with split screen and rear projection.
Scott, there's so much to hope for. Any day now, the doctors say they may find the antitoxin.
Sure.
How about the problem to compensate the sexual disintegration of Carrie's marriage?
Well, I couldn't be explicit, not in 54 or 5, whenever this film was made. I did it symbolically, with his ring falling off. And I did it with the midget, when he ran away and he met this girl midget.
2 weeks ago, I was taller than you. You said so yourself.
Yes, I remember, but...
Well, can't you see? I'm shorter now.
Oh, Scott.
I think it told you what happened. I think it was more effective the way it was done if I went and showed him naked, you know. What would I gain? Nothing. And then he grew smaller and smaller in that.
Every day it was worse. Every day a little smaller.
When he was in the dollhouse, he is finally down to about an inch.
Heaven knows how she lived through those weeks.
At first, you don't know it's a dollhouse. He just comes down, and it looks like a normal set. I think the success of the film is that you believed he was there with the spider and with the cat. And obviously, I couldn't shoot them together. He was still 6'1", and he wasn't 3 inches tall or 1.5 inches tall. So the way I did it was that I shot all the sequences in the live set, the regular set, with the cat first. I used about, there's a trainer here that has red cats. They all look alike. And there were about 40 cats. Cats, when they catch on what you want to do, they won't do it. So you have to trick them. So to get the cat to come around and smell him in the dollhouse, first I showed him, I hid some food in the dollhouse, showed the cat the food, then took him off camera, started the camera, let the cat go, and he went smelling around and trying to find out how to get in. He could get at the food. And finally, he went behind and started to push the dollhouse away from the wall to get at the food. And then we had the trainer made some kind of a noise and made the cat look at the trainer. And the trainer stayed right down here. And he called him, and the cat ran to him, and then I cut. Then I would get a close-up of the cat, and the trainer held the bird and didn't let the, I assure you, he didn't let the cat at it, but teased the cat so the cat would paw at it and hiss at it. And we were very close, and you could see the dripping jaws. What I had to do, I had to shoot everything that the cat did first, and then cut all the cat sequences together. Then I took a frame count and a metronome. And with the metronome, time with the frame count, I counted what the cat was doing at what count. So I knew what I'd have to have my actor do. When he runs out of the door, he ran across and hid behind a chair of a leg. The cat goes to the door and turns and looks. And when the cat came to the door, he started to run across the carpet. And it used one of my favorite actors, Grant Williams, who, by the way, I thought should have gotten an Oscar for his performance because he was sensational. Because he had nothing to act against. In 3/4 of the film, it's nobody but him. And I felt he got a raw deal that he never did get a picture. And it was because he wasn't in style. The style for leading men at that era was the Rock Hudsons and the Cary Grants and the dark, tall, and handsome. And he was blonde, and he wasn't the image that was being bought by the public. Although I thought if you presented him, he was such a good actor, they certainly would accept him. They certainly accepted him in The Incredible Shrinking Man. But although he was really the star actor in the picture, he didn't get the credit that was due him because the critics didn't understand what a difficult role it was for an actor to play. You know, they just reviewed it as what they saw on the screen without realizing how difficult his job was. They never knew the problems I had and he had. And so therefore, although they all gave him good notices as an actor and said he was splendid, they didn't know how splendid he was and what a real big talent he was. And I tried to get him used in any film I could think of. that I had anything to say about it. He ran away from the cat. I was after him, and the wind of the door opening closes the cellar door and knocks him into the cellar. And he finds himself in the cellar, and the cellar becomes the wildest, weirdest, like another planet to him for this size. What we take for ordinary became extraordinary. And there was a leaking water heater that was dropping, that would finally burst and flood the cellar. So we were on the set, and I was looking at the portion of the oversized legs and bottom, which I would play him at this size. And he lived in a matchbox, one of those big wooden matchboxes, empty ones, that was under the heater.
I had discovered a water supply and even a dwelling place.
And the drops were supposed to drop down. And I said, now how am I gonna get drops to look like drops to a 1-inch man? So I said, let's get a faucet up at the top of the stage. We use this big stage 12 here. And we turn it off, and nothing, just the water would spread, you know. Then I remembered my youth, kind of ill-sped in New York, where I found in my father's drawer some rubber things. And I didn't know what they were. So I filled one with water and tied it, and I had a nice tear. And I took it on the roof, and I used it as balm. I dropped it on people. And it made a wonderful, it splattered all over the place. So I said, that's what we're going to do. So I turned to the crew that was with me, and I said, well, one of you guys give me a condom. And they looked at me, you know. I said, come on now, one of you guys got a condom, give it to me. So one of them sheepishly gave me a condom. I says, good, fill it with water and tie it off. He said, do what? Fill it with water and tie it off. And go up there and drop it. So he did, and he dropped it, and it was perfect. It had a T, a kind of a tear-shaped shape, and splattered, just like a drop would. I said, that's what we're going to do. So I ordered 100 gross of condoms. Then I built a treadmill, and we put a man up there, and his job was to keep that thing loaded, so that as the drops were coming, he would be doing the treadmill like this, and the drops would be dropping. Now, he would, at a certain cue, he would go faster, because it was time for the pipe to burst. And at the cue of the pipe bursting, then we would open this thing that was holding back the water, I don't know how many gallons, a lot of gallons, and we'd flood the cellar. Once I had the cat sequence figured out on the metronome from a frame count, I did the spider. And we went into the cellar set, and I ordered 60 Panamanian spiders because they were this big compared to about so big of our native tarantulas. And we tried our native tarantulas, and they're so small we couldn't keep focus, get the nose sharp, and everything else was soft. So we had to light to a very high key to keep him in focus. So I placed him on the spider web, and we started to shake it, throw rocks that he was going to throw. We throw little things at him. And finally, an air jet from above forced him to come down, and then forced him to go across the floor. I did that and cut. And then we put the camera on a dolly, and I ran alongside the dolly, or sat on the dolly, I think, with a thread and a hook. And I tried to impale the tarantula. And after about 5 tries, we dolly with it. I would throw it, and it caught on him, and I yanked it. So I had the tarantula keep going. And that started the fight, because the tarantula wasn't dragged over the side by the scissors. But to make that, I had to have Grant. I gave him the numbers where things happen. One, when he should throw 2 or 3 rocks, the number of rocks he threw up to force the spider down. A number when the spider started to come down. A number when the spider hit the ground. A number when he should run and tie the end of the thing to the scissors and come back and wait for the spider to impale him. So on the real set, with nothing but me counting, he would go through the actions. So then we took the film and married it. And it worked, because I did it to frame count. When we put it together, from the regular set to the oversized set, we had an oversized ledge and an oversized cake and an oversized ball of string and an oversized scissors to match the props that were in the real set. And we put them together. They had to be mathematically perfect in size. And the floor had to meet the floor, and the ball of string had to completely match the ball of string and all that. So it wasn't as easy as it looks.
Richard Matheson told his novel in flashbacks.
Yes.
Why they was changed in a straightforward story.
Because I don't believe in flashbacks. Because I think flashbacks, and he got mad at me for that, Richard did, until his son changed his mind for him when he saw the film again years later. When you tell a flashback, and you come to a point that's exciting, and then you flash back to something else, you lose the thread of the story. Now you've got to come back to where you flashbacked from, pick it up again, get your audience to the same emotional points you had them, and it's impossible. You can't do it. It doesn't work. You must tell a straight line story, especially this kind of a story. I couldn't have him fighting with a spider at an inch tall and then flash back to a scene with his wife when he was normal, and then come back in the middle of the spider. The storyline is broken, and I don't believe in flashbacks unless they're essential to the telling of the story. And certainly they weren't essential to tell this story. As a matter of fact, they were a hindrance to telling the story. And I told Richard that. And we had a kind of an argument about it. But since I was directing it, and he wasn't writing the screenplay, I got my way, and we made the film my way. He didn't like the ending at first. He does now. But I wrote the ending myself. The studio wanted him to start to grow up again and go back to his wife. I said, over my dead body. I said, you can't tell this story and have him grow up again. That isn't the story we're telling. And I made a kind of semi-religious, mystical ending. And he looked Christ-like as he came through the little grill that he couldn't come through before.
I looked up, as if somehow I would grasp the heavens, the universe, worlds beyond number. God's silver tapestry spread across the night. And in that moment, I knew the answer to the riddle of the infinite.
And he got smaller and smaller and disappeared. And that speech that he does, I thought was a good ending. So if there's any blame to be taken, I'll take the blame.
I had thought in terms of man's own limited dimension. I had presumed upon nature that existence begins and ends is man's conception, not nature's. And I felt my body dwindling, melting, becoming nothing.
Shrinking Man was a big success.
Yes, it was one of the biggest successes of our science fiction films. It grossed an awful lot of money and practically saved Universal International at that time because they were suffering from lack of theater attendance because of television at that time. And this certainly brought them back into the theater and brought them back in sufficient numbers so that they made a huge profit on the film. And it's become, in some ways, to many people, a classic. It's one of my favorite films.
Were there any plans for a sequel?
No. Oh, there were plans for a sequel for The Incredible Shrinking Man. Yes, Richard Matheson wrote a script called The Incredible Shrinking Woman, which I didn't want to have anything to do with, and it wasn't done. I think he had her shrink to try to find him. And I didn't think it, you know, you'd have to do this. It would be a repeat of what you were doing, and I didn't want to do it. It was never done. But it was done last year, but not his script, by Lily Tomlin as a comedy, which I thought was very bad, because this is not comedic material. This isn't something that's funny. It's either serious, it's either telling you what can happen, even bizarre as it is. Who knows how bizarre things can happen once this atomic thing gets loose. So it had to have that kind of feeling behind it. To carry, it's a melodrama.
My fears melted away, and in their place came acceptance. All this vast majesty of creation, it had to mean something. And then I meant something too. Yes, smaller than the smallest. I meant something too. To God, there is no zero. I still exist.
When the picture was finished, and everybody liked it, I was called into the production office. And they said, "We liked your picture. You did a very good job, and you stayed under budget. You were wonderful. But there's one thing we don't understand." I said, "What's that?" He said, "What is 100 gross of condoms?" I said, "Fellas, it was a very hard picture. We had a cast party.